Hello, everyone. So we are going to start the last EcoHub X of the year. So my name is Samuel Melo. I'm a PhD student in business administration at Unicinos. And today I'm going to be the live chair of our presentation today. Firstly, I'd like to welcome here Professor Anna Buchert. Sorry, Professor, not to pronounce it correctly or not last name. That rapidly agreed to be here with us today, and also to welcome the audience that today is here. I'd like also to please put your name on the chat box here at YouTube. And afterwards, please put your questions that you might have. And that's it. So the event, as you know, is organized by EcoHub Research Group, which focus on topics of innovation and innovation ecosystem. This EcoHub, research project is linked with Unicinos University here in Brazil. EcoHub X is a project developed by the research group in which we kindly invite renowned researchers in the field of innovation management. And a great example we have here today with Professor Dr. Anna that agreed to be here with us to share her studies and experience about innovation in this field, and could fit in the agenda to be here with us. So, Professor, thank you very much one more time to be here with us, right? It's a pleasure for us to have someone like you to share your experiences and share your publications. So, very briefly, I'm going to introduce Professor Anna here. So, Professor Anna, let me get here. It's an innovation and strategy professor and a researcher at Innovation Entrepreneurs Center at Fundação Cabral, and former assistant professor in business school at Aarhus University, Denmark. She holds a PhD in business administration from the same university and master in innovation knowledge and economic dynamics from Aalborg in Denmark. And she has a lot of publications in the area of innovation. And it's very nice to have you here with us. Thank you one more time, Professor. So after my brief introduction of you, would you please just say some words about your experiences, what you researched, and what are the novelties in the area of innovation? So thank you very much.
Yeah. Samuel and our audience, thank you for inviting me. I'm very excited to be joining this community. I also feel very pleased for the invitation and also very enthusiastic by this kind of initiative. I think definitely there is a lot of potential in researching innovation management, especially the ecosystems. And I think definitely we need more research in this field, and I think also obviously to inform practitioners in this area, which is a very exciting area, and I would even say that it is even more necessary or a more relevant topic at the moment, where we're living with the digital transformation era, changes in consumer behavior, changes in regulation, new business models, and also the pandemic, which definitely has accelerated a lot of these digitalization initiatives. And I think to some extent has put the innovation in the agenda of many companies who had not prioritized it before. Sometimes I say that innovation right now is no longer an invitation, but an imposition for the longevity of organizations. And so to talk a little bit briefly about my experiences, I have to say I have a very boring career in the sense that I've always been interested in innovation. That's my only kind of topic and specialization. I started out still in my undergraduate studies in economics that I did at the Federal University of Minas Gerais in Belo, where I'm living right now and from where I speak. And at the moment, in the beginning, what really excited me was to understand the contribution of innovation and technological change to the development of nations, of countries, or how we could use innovation to tackle socioeconomic issues. So I started out in a more kind of macroeconomic agenda. And then I pursued my studies doing my master's program, as you mentioned, in Denmark. That's when I moved to Denmark. And the more I studied and started interacting with organizations, the more I realized that innovation really takes place in companies, in organizations. So I got really interested in understanding this process, how you organize for innovation. So I would say that I moved slowly from a more macroeconomic perspective to a more micro perspective. And also more recently understanding also how individuals acquire entrepreneurial attitude. So I'm also interested not only at the organizational level, but at the individual level. And so after that, I did my PhD in business. So that's why I moved, as you said, from economics to business. And I worked in a science-based public university in Denmark for 5 years after my PhD. And then I had the chance to move back to Brazil and started working in a school that focuses on executive education, which is FDC, as you mentioned. And right now, I think what really excites me is the possibility of both doing research and working with practitioners. And so, for instance, I've coordinated a community of practice focused on innovation management in the local region here, the state of Minas Gerais, which is one state in Brazil for those who are not Brazilians and that are following us. And I work in a number of customized programs as well. And I think what really motivates me is to help organizations become more innovative. But I'm also participating in the professional master's program at FDC. So I'm also involved in research and also try to keep alive my publication pipeline. So I'm kind of living both worlds of academia, but also practice. And from the very beginning, I would say, from my master's program, I was very interested in collaboration because I understood that collaboration is the essence of innovation, right? Innovation is an interactive learning process. And so during my master's research, I worked with organizations in Brazil, so some companies that managed to collaborate well with universities and research centers. And so I wanted to understand these islands of excellence. So in a sense, overall, we know that our ecosystem here lacks collaboration in many aspects, or is not very interactive if we compare with other economies, such as the UK economy, for instance, right? And so I wanted to understand then, in the cases where this collaboration actually happens, how come, what are the people involved, what are the incentives? And in a way, I pursued this interest during my PhD studies, focusing more directly on open innovation. And there I worked with small and medium-sized organizations, trying to understand why they managed to collaboration, or how come some organizations were better able to profit from external collaboration doing their innovative activities. And so I finished my PhD studies in 2011, so it's nearly 10 years. And since then, I would say that to some extent I pursued this, so I'm still very excited about innovation ecosystems and also how companies have to adapt their internal organization in order to collaborate with external partners. And I've added to this interest the issue of entrepreneurship as well. So I'm right now also working on a paper that focuses on the development of entrepreneurial identity. So people that are at a later stage of their career, after they lost their job in this specific context, people that were fired from Nokia in Denmark, how they transition to a life as an entrepreneur with the support of Nokia. And this paper, so just a little bit kind of my interest, and as I said, it's been awfully boring because I've only worked with innovation in many ways, but still I think at the time in the early 2000s, it was not something that was so popular in a way. It was not such a hot topic, at least in practice. Obviously, it's not a new research field as such, but I feel that there is much more focus on that right now for the current context that we live in. And I obviously welcome this interest from different parts of society and academia. And then kind of to warm up our talk, I also suggested to you that we focus on a paper that just came out in December in Technovation, which is a specific kind of collaboration, namely markets for technology, so companies that buy and sell licenses. And so maybe later on we can dig a bit deeper into this paper if you think it's relevant for our audience.
No, for sure, for sure. I wish just to have a very boring career, as you said. I think it's not boring at all for me, but it's really interesting how your studies could, I don't know, follow up to now with all your studies in innovation field. It's really interesting. So, of course, Professor, we can start talking about your paper, which is kindly suggested at Technovation. I think it's very nice. We have some questions. I also have some questions right now, but I think I'm going to ask afterwards, not to break the point of yours. So if you could please start some presentations about your paper that recently was published in Technovation. So the stage is yours.
Yeah, thanks. So this is a collaboration with a colleague, Goretti Caballero Cervinho, which is right now is in the Universidad de Navarra in Spain. And before I dig into the content of the paper, Samuel, maybe if you allow me, I'll tell a little bit the story of the development, because I find that this can be a bit inspiring. It's not a super kind of nice story because it has many ups and downs, but I think maybe for some of you who are doing your PhD studies and think, okay, now how can I have a publication in an international journal like Technovation, and what is the journey that took me there? So I'll try to summarize 8 years of research into that. So the start of this idea came with Goretti, whom I met during my PhD studies. I spent 4 months in the University of Carlos III in Madrid. And we met during a course there about innovation management with Professor Andrea Fosfuri, who at the time was in Spain, and right now he's in Bocconi in Italy. And then we became first friends. So that's an important point, because paper collaborations, I think it's like a marriage. You have to like your co-author in many ways, because you have to endure a very, very long process. And then we start, and she was very much kind of interested in markets for technology and licenses and so on. And I was interested in open innovation in more general. And so we had a common interest. And then we met in the Academy of Management conference in Boston in 2012. And then it was a nice summer day in the gardens, and we started talking about possibilities. So that was July 2012. Then I got some research money to get an assistant and help us collect data in 13 and 14. And the paper was only published now, and we are talking in December 2020. In the meantime, we had several personal issues from losses of people that were very, very close to us. She moved to Chile and then moved back to Spain. She had one child, and then she had the second child in the day the paper got accepted. It was such, I tell her that was such an emotional time that she started her labor in that day, or the day after, something like that. And then I moved from Brazil, from Denmark to Brazil, so we do it many times. We were rejected after 4 rounds of review in JP. And then we sent it to research policy, we got rejected again, and then we went through 3 rounds of revision in Technovation, and then I think the paper was accepted in June or July this year. So it's been a very, very long process, and I think that the takeaway is first that the review process is the one that requires a lot of resilience, a lot of persistence. You have to rewrite the paper many times. In the meantime, we realized there was some errors in our data, so we had to redo the estimations many times. We had to clean the data many times. We had to completely rewrite the theoretical part also several times. And this is not because I don't think we are particularly unlucky. I think it's part of the process. So be patient and endure. And I think also these co-authors, I think you need to be very, very thoughtful in terms of who you choose to be your co-author. Because as I said, we've been working on that for 8 years. And how many relationships last that long? And we are still good friends, and we still have an idea of the next paper when she comes back from maternity leave. But talking about the paper, I think what is interesting about the paper is that it has a very counterintuitive finding, namely that companies that buy technologies from outsiders, they have their value undermined in the market. And those who sell technology, they have no difference. The investing community doesn't value companies that buy or sell technology, and even punish companies that buys technology from outside. And I must say that this was not what we expected from the beginning. And we've redone in these various review processes. We went through, obviously, we did our estimations over and over. But in a sense, I think that's also what makes the paper so interesting, because it has this counterintuitive finding. And so in a nutshell, what we studied was American companies from Standard & Poor's index. We have, in the end, in our sample, 99 companies. We have data from 2006 to 2012. And we have data about the technological licenses that these companies bought and the ones that they sold in the market. And then we tried to see how the investing community reacted the day after this licensing agreement was either bought or sold in the market. So we look at how the investing community reacted in the stock market, and then we also analyze the company value 1 year after. So we look at the Tobin Q, that's the measure. So it's basically kind of the overall assessment of the investing community regarding the valuation of this company. And then we try to see these effects. And so markets for technology are a specific form of open innovation, if you will, where companies, part of their knowledge in turn of a pecuniary, is a monetary transaction, right? Sometimes this is made by patent, sometimes it's not. But what we know is that such markets are growing a lot, but they are very special in many ways, because you're buying and selling knowledge, right? Which is a very, very interesting and very, very special asset. And so that's what we looked in terms of theory. We merged the markets for technology literature that looks a lot into the specific transactions. We know these are very imperfect markets. And then we also combine this with the signaling theory, which is economic theory that talks about how information is used to undermine uncertainty in these markets. So I think this is in a nutshell. So we look into technological licenses as signals of innovation and when they impact the market value of organizations.
Okay, so thank you very much for your explanation. And I think everybody can read your paper afterwards to get to know a little bit better how it was developed and things about more specifically. And I would like also to thank you very much to tell the story of acceptance of your paper, because we as a PhD candidate students, we write and sometimes do not get the paper accepted right away. And it does not need to be something that demotivates us. So we should keep writing, keep improving the paper, and then sometimes, in a way, future hope not like 8 years to get to get published. To all the people that are watching us, I'm going to ask if you have any question, please ask here. I know that we have one question. I'm going to ask it right away for you. So Nina asks, says hi first. And as I haven't read the article, I'd like to know which aspects explain these counterintuitive findings, if there are some specific ones that could lead us to have an idea.
Yes. Okay, Nina, thank you very much for your question. We thought hard about that, and our argumentation is that when a company buys technology, somehow it also signals to the market and to the investing community that it's not a front runner. Somehow it has a knowledge gap that is trying to fill in. And so even if it signals to the market that is trying to catch up and is trying to acquire this new knowledge it lacks, this company also is going to endure a long process of integration of this external knowledge, because even though these technological licenses are explicit knowledge, they are not readily deployed. There is a lot of effort in integrating this new knowledge in the operations of the organization. Maybe it finds out that it doesn't fit its market after all. Maybe the licensor, that is the company that is selling this technology, is gonna behave opportunistically, meaning that maybe it's not gonna help the licensee in this long and tough process of integration. And so in the end, the investing community penalizes companies for that. That's, in a nutshell, it's our argument. Obviously, in a way, it's a speculation, because we need more research to really understand what goes in the minds of the investing community.
Okay, so Professor, thank you. Another question. Does the reputation of the company changes this result? It varies or not so much?
Good point. We don't have any measure on reputation. What we have there as a moderator is media coverage. So we look at how many analysts cover that company, and there are some measures for that, but we don't connect it to reputation. What we say in the paper is that when a company actually is able to sell a technological license, it signals to the market a certain reputation, in the sense that it is a front runner. So I probably have the state of the art in this industry, or at least I'm able to close these licensing deals, because these are not easy deals to close. It's very relational. So previous research finds that it's very relational. It's not easy to find a buyer to a potential technology. And so in a way, we speculate that they signal reputation. This is a very good point, but we don't specifically measure reputation.
Okay, so maybe it's a future study to put this, I don't know, in a way to have analyzed this point.
Yes.
And what do you think, for example, if we could keep on studying this, do you think would it change so much from the data you collected years ago than today? Does it change or not so much this license agreement to impact market value?
Good point, Samuel. I don't know. One thing that we discuss as well is that we focus on on sectors that have medium technology intensity. So most of this literature on markets for technology look at sectors such as pharmaceuticals and chemicals, which are more R&D intensive. And when we designed the sample, we wanted to look at other sectors like machinery, consumer staples, and so on. And our findings, in a way, they are contradictory to others. And one of the reasons we speculate is because these are sectors that have a medium intensity in terms of R&D and technology. And so maybe this is why we get some of these results. But we also know that this is a time-specific context. And we know that in 2008, for instance, there was an important economic crisis, especially in the US. And this might also affect, because then the investing community might be more short-term focused at the time that we collected the data. So even though we have 7 years, and so we have a longitudinal study, obviously there are some specificities of this time frame that would need to be replicated at another time series. And if you also allow me to say something else, because during the pandemic now, in the crisis, 2 companies, a very big mining company, actually 2 big mining companies contacted us at FDC exactly with this issue, because they wanted to increase the monetary value of their patents. They have a very large portfolio of patents. Some of them are not used, or some of them are used, but they are not kind of core technologies or strategic technologies. And they could foresee that companies, even in other sectors, could make use of these technologies. And they had a very, very hard time finding potential buyers to these technologies. And they asked for some help. We ended up not continuing this project because we also lacked resources internally and externally to do that. But the point is that outbound open innovation, so when you sell part of your knowledge, can also be an interesting mechanism, especially in the times of crisis. Harry Chesbrough and another colleague have a paper about that. I think it's California Management Review in 2009, where he talks about outbound open innovation as a mechanism to deal with lean times. And so just putting this research in the current context, and also what it means for practitioners.
Okay, thank you very much. It's really interesting. So, of course, the results are dependent on the sector you studied, right? Which was mid-technology companies. And of course, in Brazil or any other countries like Brazil, we would have completely different results, right? Because in the United States, they have a different idea, different interaction, different ways of getting to know the things and access to knowledge. But do you see in Brazil this strategy of licensing agreement coming into the stage, or it's not so much as well used right now for the companies?
I also think that there are country specificities, definitely. What I see right now is that markets for technology are not very well developed here. They're very embryonic. We don't have a lot of data, because also this is something that is really hard to study about markets for technology, because the companies don't have to publicize their licensing agreements. Even if you're talking about a public company in the sense that it is in the stock market, there is not an income statement there that you need to put, this is my revenue coming from licenses. I use this amount of resources to buy other licenses. And so we don't have a very, very clear picture. And this is the case in every country. But some estimates, some researchers, they estimate that these markets are growing. In Brazil, what I've seen so far, and I looked at this data a couple of years ago, so I haven't seen it more recently. But we have, just in terms of royalties coming from patents, we have a very, very embryonic market.
Okay, yes, so something that could be studied, right, in the future. Very interesting. I'm going to ask if anyone has a question, please write there, and then I'm going to read for Professor Ana. But Professor, as you said before, I would like to ask you, as you are a student and a researcher about innovation, how do you see the studies of innovation here in Brazil? Do you think it's growing a lot in the academia? And how is the relation with the studies in the academia and industry? Is there a good relation with these two sectors or not?
That's a tough question, Samuel. I'm not sure if I know about the relation. I definitely see that there is a growing interest from people in different fields, from technology innovation management, but also from organizational behavior studies, entrepreneurship, and so on. When I think the best moments I have is in the Academy of Management annual meeting, which I often attend. This year I didn't attend the online conference, and I already know that it will be online next year. And there is a specific, sometimes there are some specific meetings and seminars focused on Latin American studies and innovation management, and there are not many researchers there. And so that's a bit troublesome, I think. So that's not a very good moment. And I know that there are many hurdles in going to a conference such as the Academy of Management, and sometimes the funding to attend this conference is not really there. So I know about that. In the country, I see a growing interest and more people looking into this topic and organizing specific symposiums and conferences and so on. This is a kind of a subjective feeling that I have. Not sure if they match necessarily the industry needs. I don't have enough, I think, evidence to say something about that.
Okay, but thank you very much, because we are really interested in these topics about innovation and how the university, and it's like me specifically, I really like to know how universities and academia can help industry in innovation. We have another question here. Christian asked for you. Do you and your fellow collaborators plan to broaden this research to other areas and maybe study this phenomenon here in Brazil?
Thank you, Christian. Thank you for your question. Not right now. Goretti and I, we are looking into a review paper regarding out licenses. Right now we are not working on that because, as I said, she's on maternity leave, and she told me last week that probably in May we will resume our work. So I don't have concrete plans right now to collect data on technological licensing agreements in Brazil. It is a very very tough job to do that. So to give you an idea, Christian, for this paper we collected data on Factiva, which is a news database. So because companies do not need to report their licensing agreements, we looked at news. So this Factiva is a very, very large database of newspapers, magazines, specialized news. And then we searched this database, and then we had to manually read that with the help of a research assistant. and then to code each one of these news, whether or not this was a licensing agreement, what technology was that, what kind of agreement, what kind of royalty. And so it is a very long and arduous process of building such a database. And so I think I'm maybe at least celebrate for now that this paper finally came out before, and maybe breathe and enter a new year to gather energy to do to develop a database like that.
Okay, thank you very much, Professor. Yes, it's a very hard work and manual, sometimes we could say. I have one question for you as I read the paper, and there was a specific part of it that you've said that the presence of an analyst impacts the announcement, right? So it impacts a little bit positively. I would like could you explain a little bit better how could you see this presence of these analysts and how the impact was different than the other results?
Mm-hmm. Yes, this is our moderator variable. So that's a very good point. And this actually just kind of the backstage of the papers, which we are kind of revealing here. The backstage, there was a suggestion of a reviewer that came at JPIM, the Journal of Product Innovation Management. I think it was in review round 2 or 3. He suggested us to collect this data, and we thought that made sense for the kind of theoretical background that we were working with. And so the media coverage is the number of analysts that are professionals writing about this company. And so if we think about very popular companies such as Amazon or Tesla and Apple, so there are people that are journalists that are specialized in following the steps of this organization, like looking at their annual reports, but looking at any kind of press release that they do. And these analysts, they are very specialized in certain sectors, in certain companies, and they add a lot of they add their analysis and their interpretation. So let's say they say Apple is going to launch a new Apple Watch with these and these features, and then maybe the company already sent some signals before, maybe they have more background information, and so they are in a way better able to read the strategic moves of this organization. And so we are not working with Apple, Tesla, and Amazon. As I said, we're looking at different sectors. But what we argue is that the more analysts that you have, the more information you have about a certain company. So you're better able to understand what this technological licensing agreement means in the context of this organization. Is it going to be a new pipeline of products? Is this company going to a new market, a new geography where it's not operating right now? And so the investing community can make a better assessment of what this technological licensing agreement means in light of all the information that analysts provide them. Does it make sense?
Yes, of course. Thank you. One question here. As you have experience in Denmark, which is a completely different environment than here in Brazil, what are the main differences and challenges for studying innovation in such different realities?
Yeah, very good question. Yeah, thank you. Definitely, I think there are many distinctions if we think about the kind of the academic environment in both countries. I think first is basically that research is really valued in a country like Denmark. I think people don't question it. There are more resources simply to do things. You don't need to teach as much as you teach here. And this comparison, in a way, is unfair because I work in an executive business school, so my teaching load, I know, is also much bigger than public universities. And I'm still actually, I still have a contract with Denmark. I work as a visiting associate professor. So typically I spend 2 months of a year in Denmark, typically now from December to mid-February. But this year, because of the pandemic, I was teaching online, and I'm planning to go in September. And so, and that's not something that people question. I think that there's a lot more understanding as well as about the length and the specificities of a research work, right? Sometimes people here ask me, do you work or you just teach? I don't know if any of you have got either you work or you teach, right? As if this was not a job in itself. And not to talk about research, that is something super abstract, right? And I think the other main difference is that in Brazil, we are in the periphery. That's a fact. We are in the, geographically, we are in the periphery. This is, here it's not where main researchers are coming. They are not just, you know, sometimes popping by to visit. It's completely out of the academic scene. If you join these international conferences, I see the growing presence of Asian scholars, East European scholars. I think Europe also in the same kind of equally as important as the US and Canada, but Latin America is completely out of the picture. Just to give you a little story, last year in the Academy of Management, I was in a seminar, in a professional development workshop that was focused on publishing for non-US scholars. And then the organizers asked the audience, who is here from Europe? And say maybe 50%. Who is here from China? Another. Who is here from Australia? And so on. Latin America was not even asked. Like nobody even asked in the audience if there was someone from Latin America in a workshop that was focused on non-US based scholars. And this reflects, this is not only kind of a culture thing, but it reflects on this in the sense that some of these kind of big shots and names, they just don't come by, right? They are not, you cannot chat with them in the corridors. And when I just finished my PhD, for instance, and I was working as assistant professor at Aarhus University, an editor that was handling a paper of mine in ICC Industry and Corporate Change, he came by. He's a Swedish guy, very nice actually, and he came to give a seminar in my university, and I had the chance to meet him for lunch. And then when he was walking by, he recognized my last name and said, are you Italian? And I said, no, I'm Brazilian. Why? He said, because you have a paper with Andrea Fosfuri. I said, yeah, you're handling this paper and I need the answer to get tenure. And said, yeah, it's a long process, blah, blah, blah. But I had the chance to have lunch with him. And then we got the first review, was 2 months later. And then we went, I think, through 4 review rounds. It was a super, super long process. I'm not saying that the paper was in the end accepted because I had lunch with him. Also because ICC is a very, very serious journal, but it makes a difference. You understand what I mean? Like he saw my name, he knew I had a paper, you had lunch with him, and this was not something that I planned, but I happened to be there. But this guy is not coming to Belo Horizonte, at least not very often.
Yes. Can I just interfere and ask a question? As you're saying, Brazil is a little bit in the periphery of the research focus, but do you think that is because our research here does not have a good quality, or it because a lot of researchers here are just published in Portuguese language and then it lacks the access to other people to get to know what we are researching about?
I think it is not an issue of quality in general. I think it's an issue of really getting published in these big journals, in these big American journals, and being part of the community. And so that means attending seminars, attending conferences, and many of us not always have a funding to attend these communities and so on. So I think you need to join the conversation. And if you look back, at least in Denmark, when I started my PhD studies, also not a lot of people had so much focus on publishing. I remember that we had training workshops, publish or perish, blah, 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 because there was kind of a generation before mine where university professors were not focused on publishing international journals. And there was a lot of focus on that. And in the beginning, we could attend conferences, even if we didn't have a paper accepted, because they really wanted to stimulate and said, what comes first, the egg or the chicken? Because if you need right now it's not more like that. You need a paper accepted to be able to attend a conference. But in the beginning, to kind of foster this environment, they stimulated us in attending conference even without a paper accepted.
Okay, Professor, as you told me, you have an appointment afterwards, so I'm not going to take you so much time, but I would really like to ask you a very specific question we normally ask our guests, which is, we are very young researchers, right? So a suggestion for us would be the first, not a question, but one advice. As you said in the beginning for the paper, like we have to wait sometimes, breathe a little bit, and then one day it comes. So an advice, and afterwards, what do you think is the future studies of innovation? And what could we study about innovation? Maybe a research questions for us, something very specific or something very broad, one idea about innovation management.
Mm-hmm. Right. So I think the first question is a bit simpler. So I think that when you're doing your PhD, it's very important to kind of present your ideas to other people, to expose yourself to other ideas. And I had a supervisor who stimulated in that a lot. And I have to say that it was a tough process because I got smashed. I remember that I attended a workshop with a French scholar, and it's also a cultural thing. I remember when when I presented my project, it was like in the first 3 or 4 months of my PhD, he hit the table really hard. You cannot do this. And he criticized me in a really, really tough way that I was not used to. And it was super tough at the time, of course. I'm not saying that you have to be rude, but I think this helped me a lot along the way. And I remember as well that I had to present internally to different seminars. I presented it when during my stay abroad in Madrid. I went to many conferences. I talked to many people. If there was a visiting scholar, I booked, and I had the possibility, I would book a time, I would book a lunch and talk about my ideas. And I got awfully criticized, like really like ridicularized many times. And they said, well, you cannot say this is not, and like some basic things. And while I think this was very good for my ego in the sense that you put in your place, it's not always pleasant. But I think it's very, very important that you not only rely on your supervisor. And I'm very, very glad that I got all this feedback throughout the process. Because research is not really about being in your table in front of a Word file or in front of a Excel sheet or something like that. It is a very lonely process in many ways, but it's also a very social process in many ways too. And so sometimes I think when we are insecure about our ideas, maybe we are not sure if we have a good research design, what we need to do is to talk to more people and expose ourselves to these environments. And I think the EcoHubix might be a very, very good platform where you do that. You can use each other, but also use more experienced scholars. This is part of the process. I think there are many ups and downs. It's like riding a roller coaster. And I think I used to say that after my PhD, I never recovered my self-confidence because I think I received so much criticism that now any criticism I think is easy. I really got tough skin. And I think this is part of the process as well, to get really tough skin and used to debate ideas and understand that it's not personal. So I think this is the best advice that I would give. Regarding the future of innovation, so this is an interesting exercise. And then here I have to say that I have my own lenses, right? So this is a very, very broad field. We've done this exercise at FDC recently. We were in the process of a strategic reflection about the future of the school and what are the main research streams. And I was invited to think about that for innovation. And then I came up with 2 topics that I'm happy to share with you, with a disclaimer that they are far from the truth. They are just my point of view, which is very, very biased, of course, in many ways. So I think the first one is this whole issue of digitalization and digital transformation. In a sense, this is also something that is very kind of being popularized, right? It's very much in the media. But I think still we don't understand how these digital technologies challenge our existing theories, the existing tenets of innovation. And sometimes, especially in the media, people tend to throw out everything. So now it's a completely different world. And I would be very, very careful to do that, because how is digital innovations different from nanotechnology or from, I don't know, organic chemistry, in the sense that it really challenges our understanding of innovation processes, innovation culture, and so on. So this, I think still we don't understand very well. Our colleagues from information system, I think they are more in this road. There's a couple of papers from Nabizan who try to talk about that. So for instance, that the innovation process is much more fluid, because in the digitalized world, you develop and test at the same time. So it's not so much, for instance, as you talk about physical products, that you have maybe a development type, prototyping, then you go to the market and so on. So this is much more fluid innovation process. That's one example of one paper that I think that sheds light on this. But I think in general, we don't know very much how digitalization contributes, adds, extends, challenges our innovation management theories. The second issue, I think, is related to ecosystems. My sense is that collaboration among organizations has become more sophisticated and more complex. And so in the 90s, and if you look at the literature in the 90s, it was a lot about alliances. So 2 companies coming together. Then late 90s, early 2000s, about networks. So networks of, certain organizations that came together. Maybe we're talking about 5, 10 organizations that had a common purpose, right? So a lot about network. Then from 2003 and so on, we talked about open innovation and looked at phenomena such as crowdsourcing, where you have thousands, millions of people contributing to innovation processes. And now we are talking also more about ecosystems and that have become more complex to handle wicked problems, grand challenges, social issues such as the delivery. How do you deliver a COVID vaccine? this is a mega complex problem, and that you need to orchestrate a whole ecosystem, right? If you talk about smart cities, how do you orchestrate so many different kinds of organizations together? Because it's not only the government, it's not only the public officials, it's not only the technology companies, but also civil society in general, and many other players. So this I also see, and I'm biased because I've always studied collaboration, so I'm definitely biased, but I see potential in that. From a more practitioner-oriented approach, a very old topic that I still think that deserves more research is innovation culture. It is something that, like this year, Samuel, I don't know how many lives I've done about innovation culture. I don't know. I think I've done 18 executive programs this year. At least half of them were about innovative cultures. Multinational organizations, startups, scale up, growing companies, a lot of focus on these more soft issues. It's not something new, but it is still a big puzzle for practitioners. I think it's enough.
Okay, so everything is like I took notes, and then of course we are going to use some of this. Professor, we are coming to an end. I would one more time would really like to thank you to be here with us. I think it was a great pleasure, not just for me, but for all the audience to get to know you a little bit more and to learn with you a little bit more. So I think all your papers are going to be shared among us because they are really interesting and with like huge and renowned writers. So thank you one more time for being here, for accepting to be here with us. So thank you one more time.
It was really my pleasure, Samuel. I'm very enthusiastic about initiatives such as that. I wish you good luck in the pursuit of your research. I think we all need that. And I hope also we have future possibilities. I know some colleagues from Unicino, and so I think we've learned to be much more online in these days. So the physical distance cannot separate us if when we have common interests. So I definitely enjoyed a lot, I think when we talk a little bit about our careers and so on, it's also, we build a narrative of ourselves, and it helps us reflect on who we are and whom we want to be. So collaboration definitely is something that is very close to my heart. So I am very grateful for this opportunity.
No, thank you. We'd like to thank you very much. So everybody, please be very well, safe and sound. Take care because we are at difficult times, but we are going to overcome all of this and hope with a lot of innovation integrated and collaboration in the process as well. Right? So thank you. Bye-bye.